So in terms of Fulbright, the Fulbright, it's an Irish US program that we're running. It's actually in 180 countries. Sonia, you're probably going to talk a little bit about that. But we specifically, as a commission, we represent the Fulbright relationship between Ireland and the United States. And it goes in both directions. So we have US Fulbrighters coming to Ireland, and we have Irish Fulbrighters going to the US. So it's very much an exchange program, and it's an exchange of people and ideas and across all disciplines. I often say that because we support all disciplines, we actually we're slightly agnostic to any specific discipline. And the Fulbright program is a wider part as well. It's very much about people. So I would say to all the people on this webinar to please consider yourself already in the process, and then consider how far along that you want to go. In terms of this specific relationship and Fulbright, we would have different relationships with different organizations and sponsors in different disciplines, and very often this is because we would identify a need or a requirement to focus on supports in different areas, and certainly in the areas that we overlap with Creative Ireland. We've seen for quite a while that this is something that Fulbright would like to invest in and does invest in, and we invest in a generic way across all disciplines awards, but then we have specific awards. So the Fulbright Creative Ireland Awards, I suppose, speaks to that specificity. Where we started was in 2016 in our engagement with US institutions, a number of high-profile US institutions in the US. So this would be the Smithsonian, which I presume everybody on this call would know about. Amazing institutions. If you've ever been to Washington DC and haven't gone to see any of the Smithsonian, well then shame on you. You've missed out on a massive experience. And also the Exploratorium in San Francisco, and then the Harry Ronson Center that operates out of the University of Austin in Texas. So we have great relationships with them, and Creative Ireland came on board then as a co-sponsor with us. And co-sponsor in financial supports, and also co-sponsor in terms of our outreach and encouragement of people to apply for these awards. So they run for a number of years as specifically student awards. And then we progress to a scholar award, which again, Tanya is going to talk about, and then Sonia will go in much more detail about. But it's a useful relationship, I think, with Creative Ireland in this space for us, and it's something I think we're still building upon. It certainly aligns for a big part of what Fulbright is doing and is about. Fulbright maybe typically is viewed in the silo of academic research. In fact, we have put together over the last 5-6 years a lot more supports for professionals. In recognition of the amount of work and research and activity that is carried out by professionals as well. So you don't have to be a professional academic. And if you look at the profile of Fulbrighters over the years, you will see that there are many there, not academics, but actually were professionals. Not necessarily in their origins either, that they might not necessarily have come through an academic position, but in terms of the professional work that they're highly qualified in their own space. I think I'm just going to finish by saying that, I think we can all recognize that this has been a very tough year in Ireland, certainly for a lot of museums and art galleries and equivalents around the country. I think from discussions with my US colleagues, it might have even been tougher there, particularly where they wouldn't have a lot of state support, but actually just from philanthropy, and footfall has counted for a massive part of the revenues, and the decrease in footfall has an enormous impact. I think everybody is cognizant that it has been a very tough year for the discipline possibly that a lot of you operate in. And we would hope that something like Fulbright or this type of opportunity would be seen as a bit of a jumpstart for people to re-engage globally. Getting outside your county would be a positive at this stage, but certainly then we can progress to the position where you get outside your country and you go and restart. So I think from what we're hearing, people are certainly looking at 2022 is when you would be looking to go as being a very positive year to engage and, look outside our own home offices and front doors. So finishing on that note, I would encourage everybody to seriously consider applying And I'll hand you over to Tanya Benotti from Creative Ireland. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dara. Lovely to see, well, not see, I can't see you, but I did see some of your names, so I know many of you on the call, and to have 100 people here giving up their lunch break is something we really appreciate. So as Dara said, a bit of a background to the Fulbright partnership between Creative Ireland and Fulbright. It began in 2018, and the idea was to provide grants for short-term research fellowships for Irish postgraduate students at one of the 3 top museums in the United States. And the funding is supported on the US side and the Irish side, shall we say 50-50. The participating museums are essentially just the best in the world. So the Smithsonian Institution is the world's largest museum, education and research complex with 19 museums and galleries, and the National Zoo. So it's institutions as diverse as the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the National Air and Space Museum, the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum, the Smithsonian American Art. I mean, even the Smithsonian Institution in itself is only one of the participating partners, but it gives you a sense of the range even within that. The other 2 centers are the Harry Ransom Center in Austin, Texas, and that focuses on the creative process of writers and artists, a huge data bank of about 5 million photographs, with a focus, I think, on literature, photography, film, and the performing arts. And then lastly, the 3rd institution is the Exploratorium Museum of Science, Art, and Human Perception in San Francisco. So there are 3 what we would call fellowships awarded annually. And the objectives of those fellowships essentially are threefold. It's about harnessing the transformative power of arts and culture and creativity, and indeed heritage preservation through research collaborations. The second is to provide postgraduate students with access to internationally renowned research collections held at the world-class museums in the US. And then via that access to enhance the range and quality of research activities conducted by Irish people in the US and create opportunities for collaboration. Our first 2 fellows were Sally McHugh, who at that stage was doing her PhD in NUI Galway on heritage and public engagement, and she went to the Exploratorium in San Francisco, and David Stone from UCD went to the Smithsonian. And we funded a number of fellowships since then. In 2020, following feedback from participants and reviewing how things were going with Dara and the Fulbright team in Ireland, we decided to extend the programme. We thought it would be a great opportunity to offer the opportunity really to the broader cultural sector, who may have many years of professional experience in their field, but they're not undertaking a doctorate. So oftentimes the kind of people who were applying to the 3 museum fellowships were on a PhD track or had a PhD. And we felt that a really great complement would be to offer a professional fellowship alongside that. I should stress that it is not only people working in the arts, whether they be artists on this call or arts producers or arts administrators, but those of you who have contact with the Creative Ireland programme will know we take a very broad and generous definition of creativity, which obviously includes the arts, but it is also open to anybody working in the national cultural institutions, commercial galleries, people working in the heritage and cultural heritage field, and the broader creative industries like architecture, design, gaming. So in other words, it's a very broad offer, and the professional fellowship is not confined to the 3 prescribed US institutions that I mentioned above. It's a matter for the applicants to identify a suitable host institution. And that's why we're holding the workshop now in April, to give you plenty of time to approach possible hosting organizations. The closing date for applications is many months away. It's not till the end of October, but we think it might take you some time to find the right hosting organization. On the plus side, it means that the door is wide open. It's really exciting. There are up to 2 professional fellowships, and you can decide, do I want to go to Alvin Ailey dance in New York or such and such a design center in Minneapolis. You decide. It's up to you to make those links. We think it's a terrific opportunity. So we have the 3 museum fellowships and we have up to 2 professional fellowships. So 5, essentially, hopefully 5 Fulbrighter opportunities in 2021, which is really exciting. And I should say that apart from the professional experience itself, you're going to get to be part of the wider Fulbright family. And I'm sure probably the Fulbright team will talk to you about the various events that they hold, that they network you into a wider professional network. And you always have it on your CV, which is great too. Last year, very disappointingly, we had no applications for the inaugural year of the professional fellowship. We think that the COVID crisis facing us all was a huge part of that. And we also had some feedback that the application form, which I hasten to add is the same worldwide, may be putting off some people on the professional side because it refers to things like your publications. And people are calling in a panic going, but I'm not on a PhD track. I don't have academic publications. Do not be alarmed. The Fulbright team on the call are now going to take you through. So I'll ask Sonia and Paula, who are the Fulbright award managers, to walk you through the application process and form. They really are there to help you. And I think, as Helen will say, they certainly hold people's hands as you go through that process. So over to you, Sonia and Paula.
Hi, Rowan. Are you going to share my presentation there, please?
Yes, I can do.
Hello, everybody. It's actually a great turnout this afternoon. So thanks for all joining us. I'm just going to go briefly through the application process for the Fulbright Awards and give you an outline of what's available to all of you. And as Dara said, there's something for everybody on this webinar this afternoon. There's awards that you can apply to, so we hope you do. Okay, so just to give you a brief background of the Fulbright program, it was set up in 1946. We joined in 1957, and we recall it was under the remit of the Scholarship Exchange Board. The Irish Fulbright Commission was set up in 1991, and there's over 180 countries worldwide sending academics, professionals, researchers to the US, and the Americans are going to their countries. So you can go to the next slide. So the Fulbright Opportunities, they're open to students, scholars, artists, visual and performing artists, teachers, professionals in all academic disciplines to either research, study, teach, or lecture in the USA. Okay. What does the award provide? It provides a monetary grant, visa administration if you're going on your own, if you're going with your dependents as well, we will facilitate their visa administration. Accident and emergency insurance for the grantee, cultural and professional programming before you leave in Ireland, and also in the US, there's Fulbright chapters in every institution in the US or in every state. Ongoing support and links to a global network of Fulbright alum, as in once a Fulbrighter, always a Fulbrighter, you're part of the Fulbright family. So it's an experience of a lifetime, and I suppose I've been here for quite a while, so I've seen people come back after taking part in the program, and they will say it's fundamentally changed them and their outlook. So it's definitely we're a Fulbright family. You're joining a global network of peers. So while you're in the US, depending on an institution that you're attending, there could be other Fulbrighters from other countries. So you're definitely building a network, and that's a lifelong network. Okay, the next slide. That's just an introduction to Helen, who'll be talking after myself and Paula. And then there's some of the Fulbright alum that Paula's going to mention as well, who were the Fulbright Student Creative Ireland alum. So establish your eligibility for students and scholars. Irish awards are open to Irish and EU citizens. So EU citizens, 3+ years residency in Ireland. You must demonstrate a strong rationale for where you are going in the US and why you're going to the US to undertake your study. So I suppose when they're reviewing your application, they want to see, why do you need to go to the US to do this undertake this piece of research, and why can't you stay in Ireland and do it, okay? You must comply with the 2-year home rule visa requirement. So this is a global rule. with Fulbright. So anyone going to the US on a Fulbright it's the idea of the brain drain. So when the program was set up, they didn't want people to stay in America. They wanted them to return to their home country to share their experiences that they'd learned in the US. So therefore, the requirement is that after your study or your research in the US, you're required to return to Ireland, or we consider the EU at this present time, as also your home country. So you need to return to Ireland for 2 years. This doesn't mean you can't go to the US for vacation or to do another research, program, but it means that you can't apply for a working visa or residency. So that's only when it becomes an issue, okay? You cannot be a dual US Irish citizen. So you cannot hold a US passport. You cannot be living in the US at time of applying. And not have recent extensive experience of studying in the US. That means that you are literally just come back from the US after spending 5 years there. Again, if you want to query any of these, just please reach out to myself or Paula. Okay, so as we've talked about the application process, and some people finding the application process or the application quite daunting, but I suppose even people have said even not being successful and going through the application was an experience in itself, and they learned a lot about themselves and about how to put a good application together, because it's quite comprehensive. So, I mean, it's definitely worthwhile whether you're successful or not. Okay, so the timeline. The application's open in August 2021, and you reach out to us and we send you a link. So as we said, the application is generic. It's a global application that we have to feed into, okay? The deadline is October 2021. There is a technical review of applications between November and December 2021. And the interviews take place, if you're shortlisted, interviews take place between January and February 2022. And we make our offers at the end of March 2022. Okay, so to plan your application, and you're in a great position now because it's only April. So you need to review the information on our website, choose an award that's suitable to you. Find a course, an area of research that you want to look at in the US. Research what it means to be a Fulbrighter. I suppose this is quite unique within the funding bodies. We're not just looking at your research proposal. We're also looking at you as a person. And would you make a good Fulbrighter? What can you bring to the program? It's not just a kind of a academic, or it's also a cultural exchange program. So it's about you going to the US and imparting knowledge on your colleagues in the US, and also bringing that back here to Ireland and sharing it. So that's a really fundamental part of our program, is what it is to be a Fulbrighter. And that's why we ask for a personal statement. Okay, and then if you register your interest with Fulbright.ie, again, that we send you the link in August. Okay. So there are 3 categories of awards that would be applicable to anyone thinking of applying in the creative space. There would be the Irish Student Awards. So that's for postgraduate research or postgraduate degree programs, master's programs in the US, or PhD programs. The Irish Scholar Awards for academics or professionals in research or lecturing in the US. And then the Irish Tech Impact Awards, academic research, professional research with an ICT focus. And again, this is in all disciplines, including the visual and performing arts. So this is something you could look at as well. Next slide. So Fulbright Irish Student Awards. These are the general student awards that people in the creative space can also apply to, okay? So these are for visiting researchers or degree-seeking students. You must establish your own affiliation in the US for degree courses with the US institution. Or if you're doing a research proposal, again, you have to find your own affiliation in the US. 4 to 12 months in duration, and the approximate amount of the award is €30,000. Again, depending on what state you're going to in the US and for how long you're going. Okay, and then we have the Fulbright Irish Scholar Awards. These are in all academic disciplines, including the visual and performing arts, possess a PhD or 5 years professional experience. Research or lecture in the US, you must again establish your own affiliation. The awards are for 3 to 12 months, and the max award is €35,000. Okay, so then we have the Fulbright Tech Impact Scholar Awards. Again, these are in the creative space, so it's worth thinking about. They're slightly different to the All Discipline Awards. So you must possess a PhD or 3 to 5 years relevant professional experience. Preference is given to early career researchers, so PhD conferred since 2019. So it's non-commercial research exploring transformative power of ICT. So it's for a minimum of 2 weeks and a maximum of 3 months duration. And this max award is for €11,000. So again, it's using the power of ICT, but it could be with a creative research proposal. So, you know, think outside the box. This is something that you could also apply to. Okay, these are just, we have our sponsored awards, and as Tanya said, we have the Creative Ireland Award. So these are some of our other sponsors that we have as well, okay? If you're applying to a sponsored award, like the Creative Ireland Award, you have to put in a sponsored award form, okay? So be strategic, look at the website, see how you will align with their mission, etc. Okay, Rowan. So these are the Fulbright sponsored awards. We're just giving you an overview of what's available, but obviously for the students awards, it would be the Fulbright Creative Ireland Museum Fellowships, which Paula is going to talk about. Or for the Scholar Awards, it could be the Creative Ireland Fellowship, the Tech Impact Award, or the NUI Scholar Award. Again, these are all for people in the creative space. So the application requirements, yes, it is a big application, but you have loads of time now if you start researching and looking at what your options are, okay? So we want personal information, which is your CV. We want a personal statement or the Fulbright statement. So that's where we want to know about you. So what you can bring to the program and who you are. That's a really important aspect of the application. We want your project statement. So what you plan to do in the US and how you plan to do it. You need 3 recommenders. Again, the recommenders have to submit the references online. So it's important to get them on board early and let them know what they need to do. Okay, then transcripts, this is just for students. Passport copies, samples of work for artists. So we need 3 hard copies that we can send out to our reviewers. And then letters of affiliation. Again, this is about finding a host in the US and building a relationship and then asking for a letter of affiliation so they will host you. Sometimes this doesn't happen at time of application, but it's in process. So don't be overly concerned if you don't have it with your application. It can come at a later stage. Next slide, Rowan. So preparing your application. So why is your work groundbreaking? What's unique about your work? The rationale for going to the US. It's a really important kind of element. Like, why the US? Why do you need to do this research in the US? Why can't you do it here in Ireland or in Europe? So the justification for researching in the US is really important. Identify an area and concentrate on it. Explain the research questions, the objectives, the expected results, okay? What impact will your work have on your research, on your career? Okay, it's really important to think about this. Okay, so the personal statement again, this can be, I suppose, well, this is a very general kind of view, but I suppose sometimes Irish people find it hard to talk about themselves, but it is about talking about you and marketing you and what can you bring to the program and what makes you unique. We want to know all about you. And it's something that if you get to the interview stage, the interviewers will be asking you those questions. They want to know about you and what leadership qualities you have, what makes you a good ambassador for the Fulbright program. What are you going to do in the US apart from what you do within your research area? So we want to know about your interests and your motivations, okay? And what you can achieve in the US upon your return. And it's all about the benefit of becoming a Fulbrighter, okay? We welcome candidates from underrepresented groups, and the more of them we have, the better it is for us as a program, because we want to be as inclusive as possible. So from communities, areas of research, home organization, HEIs, geographical areas in Ireland, and then ethnicities and ability, but also geographical areas in the US. Like the US is a big place, and it's got a lot of institutions that you could do your research in. And we find that a lot of people will look to the East and the West Coast, but I mean, there's unique little communities that it might be worthwhile tapping into or researching. And you might be the only Fulbrighter there on campus, which makes it quite unique and the experience really unique. So it's definitely important as well. So finding a host, I understand this can feel quite daunting, but I mean, a lot of the times when we tell people to kind of reach out and saying you're applying to Fulbright, the Americans will be more open to that. And Americans are extremely open to responding to you if they get an email from you. They're really good at that. So finding a host, talk to experts in your field, because they will have gone to the US, maybe attended a conference, maybe done their own research, and they'll know the best places for you to go. Or talk to Fulbright alum who've been through the journey, who can help you with that. They're more than willing to help you, whether they're American alum or whether they're Irish alum. It's definitely worth checking out our website. And if there's someone in particular you want to contact, just send me an email and I'll send your email on to them in the first instance. Okay. Also ask your mentors. And then you can select a degree or host institution in the US. But I suppose this and recommended is something that you really need to focus in on now. It can take a while to build up a relationship and then get to the level where they want to invite you to come to their institution. So it's kind of putting yourself out there and thinking outside the box about institutions in the US that could be of interest to you to undertake your research. Okay, and this is just when you submit your application and we start doing the technical review in between November and December. So as you can see, the technical or the academic professional record and project statement are weighted higher at the technical review stage, and the cultural engagement and leadership are slightly lower. So we send out to 3 reviewers in your area of research, and we have global reviewers. So they're not just Irish based, they're US based as well, and other countries too. So at the technical or at the first review, we're looking more at your professional record and your project statement, and then the cultural and leadership elements as well. But when it gets to interview, this flips. So at interview, it's usually a panel of 3 who won't be experts in your field. So it's more the elevator pitch of what you're planning to do in the US and how you're planning to do it. But then they'll be looking more as you as a person, what you can bring to the program, what's unique about you that makes you different, and what can you bring to Fulbright? When you're in the US, what are you going to do outside your area of research to give back? And when you come back here to Ireland, what you're going to do as well. Okay, I'm just going to, Paula, my colleague who's the manager for the Student Program Award, is going to talk about the fellowships, the student fellowships.
Thank you, Sonia. So the first one is the Creative Ireland Museum Fellowship to the Exploratorium. I visited this institution in California, and I'm very jealous of who will ever gets this award. As Tanya previously mentioned, Sally McHugh was awarded this fellowship to the Exploratorium previously. So this is for research opportunities for the student category only. It's for current master's students or PhD students in progress not awarded. As Sonia previously mentioned, for most student awards are between 4 and 12 months. This is an exception. So this is for a 3-month period, and you must seek a letter of support from the host and include it in the Fulbright application. So the Exploratorium must accept you as a candidate, and you must be accepted by the Fulbright Commission as well. So see the Exploratorium website to identify potential content and themes in the area of current interest. So they've quite a large catalogue, so I definitely advise you, if you're interested, to going onto their website. And closer to the awards launch date, the end of August, I'd advise you to visit our website, fulbright.ie, and to look at the specific flyer for the Exploratorium, and they will have the contact details of the person in the Exploratorium you should contact. Next slide, please. And then we have in the Harry Ransom Centre. Now, in the Harry Ransom Centre, Maeve Casterly was the first person to be awarded the Creative Ireland Museum Fellowship to the Harry Ransom Centre in Texas. And Maeve was focusing on women's history and how the public engage with women's history. And she worked the public engagement section there in the Harry Ransom Centre. So these are research opportunities, again, for the student category only. Preference will be given to current PhD students, so that's where the PhD is still in progress, not submitted. Again, this is an exception. These are for a 3-month period, whereas most Fulbright student awards are for between 4 and 12 months. And projects should engage with collections and must demonstrate a commitment to innovation, creativity, and include plans for both scholarly and community engagement. As Sonia said, this is really in keeping with kind of the greater good and the engagement, that you're not just kind of thinking about what you're going to do inside the lab or the classroom. It's about that outside of the museum engagement. And again, you must seek a letter of support from the host and include it in your Fulbright application. Again, please check the flyer that will be available on our website closer to the launch date. And then the Smithsonian, as Dara alluded to earlier, if you go to Washington, DC, you can nearly not avoid the Smithsonian. There's so many fantastic different institutions dotted around DC, really broad, wide range of opportunities there. And not only with the award, but with Fulbright in general, that with Fulbright, it's open to all disciplines. I think Susan Boyle, who's due to begin her Fulbright award in the coming months in Smithsonian, is an example of this. Susan will be undertaking her Creative Ireland Museum Fellowship in the Smithsonian, exploring the archival material in the museum's collection to ascertain the influence that Irish and European immigrants to the United States had on the local beer brewing in the United States around the 1920s. We've had a very different kind of group of people undertake this award at Smithsonian. Fernando Cano, whose major field of study is art history, went to the Smithsonian, and he was based in the Office of International Relations, and he was looking at the socio-cultural impact of exhibition making. And then we also had archaeologists Patricia Kenny and David Stone, who Tanya mentioned earlier. So these are research opportunities open to students category only. You must have a primary degree in arts, history, culture, science, or other relevant discipline. And applicants in diverse fields are very much so welcome. These are different to the other 2 sponsored Student Creative Ireland Fellowships in the sense that this is for a 6-month period, not a 3-month period. And once again, you must seek a letter of affiliation and support and have that in your application. Next slide, please. So I think I'm going to hand you back over to Sonia now.
Thanks, Paula. Just to go back to the Creative Ireland Award for professionals, Rowan. Yeah, so apologies, the presentation is I had a problem with putting the presentation up, so it didn't flow as I thought it was going to be. So we have the Fulbright Creative Ireland Professional Fellowship Awards as well. So these are for professionals with to go and research in the US. So research opportunities are open to professionals with at least 7 years experience working in the creative, cultural, or heritage sector. These are for 3 to 6 month period. So these are slightly different to the All Discipline Awards. Candidates select their own preferred US host institution. So again, it's looking at options in the US where you can go, contacting host institutions, maybe, I suppose, deciding on a research proposal, then sharing it with colleagues here in Ireland, and then making contacts in the US and sharing that proposal with them. It's really important, I suppose, getting a feel for, you know, talking to alum in Ireland and getting a feel for what they think is a good research proposal, but also they might have good, they might have good ideas for host institutions in the US. So it's definitely worth putting feelers out before contacting US institutions, okay? Again, you must seek a letter of support from the host and include in the Fulbright application. So again, this is slightly different from the All Disciplines Award because sometimes scholars will submit an application without a letter of affiliation and it might follow along, which is acceptable because sometimes it can take, it's longer to make that process happen and make those connections and networks, okay? So this is the Fulbright Creative Ireland Professional Fellowship Award. Okay, Rowan, if you want to go to the next slide. So I just want to go briefly through, as we send Irish to the US, we obviously bring Americans into Ireland. And we have 5 categories of awards. We have the US Student Awards, US Scholar Awards, the Specialist Awards, the US Global Scholar Awards, and the Fulbright Schumann Awards. The ones that are probably most applicable to people on this call, if you're thinking of hosting a US scholar here in Ireland, it's just that's why we're doing it, to give you kind of a brief overview of how they work. So US students come to do postgraduate research and degree programs here in Ireland. US scholars come to do academic or professional research or lecturing programs here in Ireland. And then we have the US Specialist Award, which is a short-term award for academics and professionals who can come into Ireland, and they generally stay for around 6 weeks. And it's usually for curriculum development or a unique kind of project that the host here in Ireland wants a specialist to look at, okay? If you want to go on to the next slide, Rowan. So just to say, again, in the creative field, we have a US scholar usually every year who comes to IMA in the visual arts. And then we also have an award for US students to come to Dublin City Gallery, Hugh Lane. So there is that connection going on. And again, there are definitely people, the students at Hugh Lane or the scholar at IMA is another person that you could be tapping into, or previous Fulbright alum in those areas, because they've gone back to their own institutions in the US and they might be delighted to welcome a Fulbrighter to go and research at their institution as well. So again, it's another way of making connections and finding a host institution in the US. Okay, so your next steps for applying for a Fulbright. So our awards open in August. Start reaching out to your recommenders or your references now. Interchangeable word. Select host institutions in the US that you want to attend. Research the Fulbright ethos. Very important, a really important part of your application. Talk to other Fulbrighters and follow us on social media. And please reach out with any queries you might have as we go through the process. We can be quite busy between August and October, but we will deal with as many queries as we can. And I just want to reiterate, it is open to everyone on this call. Across all academic disciplines, visual and performing arts, we welcome your applications. We want to see them as well. And I suppose one thing that came across when Tanya was talking was the idea that people felt daunted by the part of the application that looks for academic, something that you basically, someone in your areas wouldn't be, they were looking for your publications, etc. You know, this isn't relevant to you and we're aware of that. So please, if you have any queries like that, you're not sure whether you fit, reach out to us because we're here to help and we want to answer those questions because we want you to apply. So hopefully, again, if you don't want to ask anything in the chat box now, please reach out to awards.ie and we'll be happy to help.
I think Helen is going to speak now. So.
Hello. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm afraid I'm having trouble finding, okay, sorry, just let me set up the slideshow. Great. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much to Fulbright and to Tanya for the invitation to join you this afternoon. I'm supposed to say from the outset, I wasn't eligible for the Creative Ireland scholarships when they were advertised. So I applied for an all disciplines scholarship. So it's fantastic to see that Creative Ireland and Fulbright have been talking about opening that bandwidth out and making it more accessible to more artists and other creatives in the field. Just to give you some background, I spent 4.5 months in New York between October 2019 and the end of February 2020. I had received a 3-month scholarship to base myself in the Museum of Modern Art. The rationale behind my proposal was that as IMA was entering into its 30th birthday, which is this year, I was really interested in what the Museum of Modern Art were doing with respect to their education archives and how they were actually mapping out the history and story of how education had developed there in their 80-year history. So I was embedded into their education program and also worked really closely with their archive team. But what I was interested in was not just what they archived, but how that archive in turn was informing their program, which was marking their 80th year. So how the structure in the education department in particular, what structure they had built up to map out and continue to archive practice in what is often a very ephemeral field. So one of the things that I was really curious about was one of the initiatives that the founding director of education some 80 years ago had was to develop a creativity lab for children, which in turn became a worldwide example of early childhood education some 80 years ago. And in its current iteration, the current head of education starts to look at how a public space like a Museum of Modern Art in the 21st century could create creativity spaces for people of all ages. So whilst I spent time looking at the historic archives, I also spent time shadowing what was happening in the live day-to-day programs. Being in the Museum of Modern Art, and indeed, importantly, being in New York as a Fulbrighter, did open doors. I remember my orientation when I was successful of my application. The team here reiterated how being a Fulbrighter would open doors. And indeed it did. Not alone did it actually give me, and this is a very practical thing, free access to all of New York's museums. It also, I found that unlike Ireland, where I think a very small proportion of the population know who and what Fulbright is, in the States, the familiarity with Fulbright is huge. The other thing that I found about being in the States is that professionally, the Americans are incredibly generous. Nothing was too much to ask. So whilst I was based in the Museum of Modern Art and had access to both my peers and others in the museum, I also was introduced to relevant people across a whole range of arts institutions and museums whilst I was there. And everybody was incredibly generous. And what I was really doing was I was on a kind of a hunter-gatherer kind of mission, because Emma, like many of the museums in Ireland, had been awarded a research grant to develop a collections and learning centre. So I wanted to use my time in New York to really gather as much information to bring back to my team in the museum on my return. Being in New York, and I purposely put this slide up because this was one of the invitations in the Creativity Lab in MoMA, but it became quite a metaphor for me while I was in New York as a Fulbrighter. What I found was that whilst, and we can speak about it in the Q&A, the application process was challenging. I won't deny that. But what I found was that if you apply a logic to it and take time preparing your means to actually build up the rationale, first of all, of why one wants to go to the US, why one wants to go to a particular institution or find the host, and what one wants to do there. There's a sort of a logical sequence to the application process that both gives you time to actually develop your research question or your rationale for being there, but also to think about why the US rather than another country, and to really tap into what I would just call, and I know I'm repeating myself, professional generosity that I found so open in the US with US colleagues. Whilst there, support was incredible. Like I had support from the staff, in particular the head of education in the Museum of Modern Art, whom I had built up a relationship with over a number of years professionally. I had support then in the wider field from the Fulbright Support IIE agency while I was there. And also there was invitations to join a number of both social and semi-professional exchanges through the Fulbright chapter and also through One to World, where we had opportunities to meet over meals, over coffee, and share both our experiences of being in the US, in New York, and share ideas around our research. And that has continued on my return home to Ireland. Although we've all been, catapulted from, in my case, flying in on the 29th of February to suddenly, rather than walking the streets of Manhattan, finding myself locked up for most of the year in my front bedroom, I've been tapping back into the States through Zoom calls to my peers there. And support has been actually incredibly important. And I would think it's been mutually important because, as many people will know, the pandemic and then Black Lives Matter protests have really put pressure on museums and galleries, and we've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of my colleagues furloughed, and indeed many of them have faced job losses. But again, with reference to cultural exchange and the importance of Fulbright, I feel that the morale that we can build up and the sense of purpose that we can build up in this virtual world has been really invaluable and really has grown out of the Fulbright experience. So I think I'll wait till the Q&A, and I'm very happy to answer any very specific questions. And as Sonia said, I am very happy also to follow up with anybody on an individual basis, because I got that sort of support from individuals before I applied. So thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Helen. I think Dara is going to lead on the Q&A session now, I believe, if you want to unmute there, Dara.
Roland, thanks very much. I just take a small opportunity just to reiterate kind of some of the key points that were made there. Sonia, in particular, she's talking about looking at the person, and we're very much looking at that. And I think in terms of where you might not see where you fit on the application, create your own space, because it's real people looking at your application in Ireland, and it's our colleagues and reviewers here who are well versed and understand what they're looking for. So where you don't see a space, create space. And I think an important thing, and it's threaded through some of the questions, but it should make sense to you first. And if it makes sense to you, then you can explain it to us. So looking back through, I did answer a couple of the questions that were there. One of them was about deferrals, and no, there's no opportunity for deferral. We would essentially operate from, if you applied this year, you would expect to go at the earliest, I suppose you would be going would be in July 2022, but we would expect you then to have finished by July 23. So the end of July in that year. So you couldn't defer then into the following 23, 24. You could, if you needed to, and your award was obviously in that period, you could delay your start date once you complete within that time, but there is no deferral. So that's kind of the answer on that one. There was a question about the 2-year home rule, and it said, would the 2-year rule not apply to residency or employment in the United Kingdom? It's a little bit of an open-ended question, so I'm going to guess at what's mentioned by that. It's on the basis that if you are an Irish citizen and applying to the Irish Commission, which you can do, and if you want to do your residency, or if you want to do your home rule, you consider that doing your time in the UK. The issue behind this is the Fulbright can't definitively answer that, because you take a risk that the US Homeland Security would view that you didn't fully fulfill your home rule. So the expectation would be that you do fill it in Ireland. We had pushed over the years in the same way that we allow EU citizens with 3 years plus to apply. So we have pushed or stood behind the potential for people to do the residency within the EU country, and the UK obviously was one of those. Now that it's not, we genuinely can't say what the outcome would be. So this only applies obviously if you want to subsequently go for some sort of a long-term residency visa in the US. If you're not looking to do that, well then it won't impact on you. So that's the best answer I can give at the moment without any further detail. Because certainly the person who put this in, the person could certainly contact us independently. Paula or Sonia, were there any questions you wanted to address that weren't responded to already?
Sorry, just there was one person had a query about, and I answered it. They want to know is it just, was their own arts, like if they, you know, they wanted to do a project about their own art practice, you know, like as in an artist going and you know, and that's obviously acceptable, you know. Brian Maguire is going over, actually going over hopefully next month. He's going to Missoula Arts Museum to work on his own practice, you know. He's doing a number of paintings. So absolutely, you know, we've had loads of visual artists going over under Fulbright to work on their own research, and that's totally acceptable, and we welcome it, you know. As in, we've had loads of musicians going on Fulbrights as well. So I mean, we're totally inclusive of all people in the visual and performing arts, and please apply, you know. It's really important to have you within the Fulbright family.
Sonia,
There's a
could you
question-
answer the question about the program being longer than 1 year? Because I think that's pretty clear. You wouldn't be going for more than 1 year. I think you can answer
No,
that.
look, people can go for more than 1 year, but the Fulbright will only be for that year. So some people would do maybe a 2-year master's or a 3 or 4 year PhD. But in terms of the Fulbright aspect of it, it wouldn't be longer than a year.
The funding wouldn't be longer than 1 year.
Yeah.
So
And our supports.
yeah, so the funding wouldn't be longer than 1 year, but you're kind of from a visa perspective, they will facilitate renewing your visa on a yearly basis, kind of under the Fulbright umbrella. But the financial support is finished after the 1 academic year. And again, it's all to do with, you know, your visa and having proof of financial funding for the next years in the master's or the PhD program.
There's a good question from Chloe who asks, do you see a potential for an arts transdisciplinary research exchange that includes science labs and actual art making as part of the research, both artistic, clinical, academic, book-based? The short answer would be yes. In particular, I guess I could certainly say through the all disciplines, absolutely, you know, and just the way kind of research and activities are going anyway, we find an awful lot of things are transdisciplinary anyway. There are less and less purists, I guess, is short term. Through the specific Creative Ireland Professional Scholar Award, again, the other eligibilities might more apply here rather than the actual work you're going to do. So I don't think so. The work you're going to do isn't necessarily the driving force here. And Sonia, I think, is just answering our Rowan answer there, just in terms of dual citizenships, there is unfortunately not eligible to apply.
And then there's an interesting question from Sinead, basically, how do you quantify the experience? As in, some people have more informal experience in terms of being an artist that's not embedded within an institution, which I think isn't a problem. As in, if you're an artist practicing independently for 5 years, I don't envision that as being a problem when applying for the Creative Ireland professional scholarship as opposed to the student one.
Well, you can apply through the all disciplines. So the Creative Ireland is plus 7 years, but if you want to apply through the all disciplines, if you've less than 7 years, you're welcome to apply. But again, yeah, that's what we mean. If it's your own practice and that's what you're working on, absolutely apply to the Fulbright Commission for that. We welcome it.
Okay, another question here. Does it need to be an educational institution you partner with, or could be a commercial company, a film studio, theatre company, etc.? Going to the film studio, theatre company, etc., etc. being a broad thing, I would say yes, you could make a case. The commercial company potentially, particularly if you're bringing some program or there's some aspect of educational exchange part of it. Now, when I say educational, it could be your artwork or artwork exchange. So look, if it makes sense for you, by all means, you could touch base with us in advance. Just give us a very broad outline for what you want to think of, and we could give you I guess a more robust answer if you could do it. But in theory, yes.
Yeah, if there's good justification for going to a film studio or whatever, yeah, absolutely, it's possible. But again, as Dara said, it is always good to reach out if they're kind of unique to what we usually deal with. But yeah.
And Sonia, there's a question, the very first question from somebody anonymous. Do you have to be employed in an institution? I work in cultural heritage, but I am self-employed.
No, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I suppose, yeah, it's limitless. Let's put it that way. You know, that's what we're all trying to get across today, is that absolutely apply, you know.
We actually
Rita has asked how many scholarships are available in total across the Fulbright program.
That's a piece of string, but just having looked at 20 across the specific Fulbright, and again, we've a little bit broader types of Fulbright, we're about 63. That's the US and Irish side of things combined. But again, those numbers are a little bit down, I suppose, because of the pandemic. So it could be closer to 70. And there was a question, sorry, I was going to answer and I've lost track of it.
There's one about timelines there. So it's, results of applications are shared around March, but when does the award need to be used by?
It's
I kind of
usually
had
within
answered
the,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, from July to July. So it'll be July, it would, if you apply this year, it'll be July 22 through to July 23.
There's the last one there. Can you say a little more about addressing the rationale and what might need to be included that might not be so obvious? Definitely the strong rationale to be US based, as in why do you need to go there? Why can't your kind of research be undertaken in Ireland would be something definitely to address.
Like if there was if you know, it's for scientists, it's like there's a lab that are doing research that isn't happening here in Ireland. So therefore, the justification is I'm going to learn a new skill and I'm going to bring that skill back to Ireland. And in the creative, it's the same. You're going to learn, maybe if it's not your own, if you're not an artist, you know, you're learning something new and bringing it back. But if it's an artist, maybe you're going to, I don't know, you're going to paint something that's unique to America, or you're going to be mentored by a sculptor, or you're going to go to a theatre company that has a unique performance piece that you want to be integrated with, or whatever. The world is your oyster, but it's about, I suppose, that American element, that is, there's something unique in your field that you want to do over there that isn't available here, or there's a photographic archive that you wouldn't get access to here in Ireland. Or I mean, I could give a million, I think I could give loads of examples, but I mean, it's, and I think what Helen said is really interesting. You have to decide where you want to go and why you want to go, you know, and why you want to go there, just like 3 layers, and think it out logically in your head, and put it down on paper and revisit it and look at it again, and you'll get there, definitely.
And one that's popped up here is like they're talking about possibly going to different institutions, maybe to follow a research thread. Is that something that's possible through Fulbright?
It is possible, again, with justification. And again, each institution has to give you, this is just the technical, you know, a letter of affiliation with dates. But yeah, so we've had scholars, generally scholars in the past, going to, maybe one scholar went to up to 3 institutions with a justifiable reason for doing that, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I believe someone who's just joined late, they're a musician. I think you've already spoken to this, Sonia. How refined does your idea need to be? It's that it needs to kind of make sense to yourself. But
yeah, I suppose, if, you know, even give us, what were they thinking of doing, you know, if they want to let us know that, and then we can help them along the way if they feel that they need to, you know, trash it out with someone, you know, get someone else's opinion. That's a really good thing. And, you know, there's loads of performing artists, Fulbrighters, that they can reach out to as well, which can give them a helping hand, which, again, if they send me an email, and I can share it with those performers, you know, because it's so important to see yourself in Fulbrighters, you know what I mean? To see what you do. Like, I know Creative Ireland, Tanya, you're are funding the mobile music thing that's going around to the care homes in Ireland, and Gerald Paragon is a Fulbrighter, you know, so he's a Fulbrighter from maybe 15 years ago. So I mean, it's really important that you want to see yourself in the people that have come through our program, and we can definitely help you see them or connect you with them if you can't see them on our website as well.
And Helen, it would be fair to say that you probably were 2 years thinking about it before you applied, that A, don't feel like you have to do it this year if you feel, you know, the timing isn't right, and B, that it did take that length of time before you set it up. Would that be fair, Helen? And also, I don't think I'm telling any tales out of school, but there are some Fulbrighters on the Creative Ireland Fellowship that had applied more than once, and then they got it on their 2nd or 3rd attempt.
Yeah, I think that's really important. That I'll go for your latter and then I'll go to the other. I think it's really important that people feel it's not a rejection if you're not accepted. It is about revisiting and reapplying. And I think, yes, for me, I think the research was incredibly important. And part of that research, Tanya, was in talking to people who had been previous awardees, and stories like people going out and, for example, not having a place. The agency they were going to had shut down, so they didn't even have a place to go to. So for me, it was really, really important that I could be facilitated at that time in MoMA. And even with that, one of the people that I was going to connect with, who was actually doing the research on the archive, the day I arrived, both of us ended up at parties, a farewell for her and a welcome for me, because she had gotten a job back in Spain, where she was originally from. So, we had to do our connecting through Zoom, but I had to shift. So a little, not being so fixed in what you want to do also is really important. And I think the one thing that I didn't realize when I went into it was this is, it's an opportunity to start something, not to arrive with a finished portfolio at the end. And that's what I really love about Fulbright. It is about enabling, and me at my stage of my career, enabling me to do a lot of reflective practice, but also to start something new. So it's about having, I think, as firm a foundation when you get there as you can, and possibilities for connecting with people while you're there. One thing we didn't talk about, and I don't know if this is too much detail, but people expect, I think, before they go to Fulbright, that the accommodation will be looked after. It's not looked after. So that's some of the advice I got from Fulbright, like to either go for a month before you start, in order to get accommodation, is really wise. So there's all of that kind of around your research. There's the moving to another city or another town or another university part of it as well, that all needs to be taken into account.
I might ask the Fulbright team to talk about the money side of things.
So the award is it's a living, I suppose. It's tax free, so you don't pay tax on it. But I suppose it would be considered covering your accommodation and your general living expenses, and also your return flight to the US. So we kind of go on an MMR rate, which is per state in the US, or sometimes per institution. So like Boston, New York, Chicago, the most expensive states in America to live. So the MMR rate might be higher per month in that state than it would be in, Ohio, or you know what I mean, somewhere where it's not so expensive to live. But it is sometimes, it's definitely worth, sometimes people have to collect funding. So Fulbright is part of that funding package. They might have savings, they might look in other avenues of funding as well. And we welcome that too, because it is expensive to live in the US. And sometimes the award, you might feel that you need additional money. Also, people are bringing dependents. Like, we welcome people bringing their dependents. We facilitate the visa process and we do what we can. But again, they need to support them while in the US. So that's another important part. If you're bringing your family, you need to think about additional funding, because unfortunately we're not in the position to fund monetary, like we can visa administration, etc., and help you in any other way. But from the money aspect, we wouldn't be able to do that. So, but a lot of Fulbrighters do bring their families with them for the experience. And that again is kind of life-changing, especially if you have kids coming with you, or teenagers. It's a great opportunity. I have a scholar who just left yesterday, and she brought her sons as well with her for her 5-month stay. So it's definitely an experience that is worthwhile.
I don't know if Sonia McHugh, our first Fulbright fellow, is on the call, but when we asked her to speak, what struck me was that having a certain level of maturity, I hope you won't take that the wrong way, Helen, but she wasn't in the first flush of youth, and she said, I really needed that, because in the Exploratorium, I had to be a self-starter, a bit like yourself, Helen. The person she thought she was going to be working with had moved on. So, you're not sitting around expecting somebody to have it ready for you. You've got to be a self-starter and mature enough to cope that the person you may have thought you were working with has moved to another department. and you've got to kind of be a little bit pushy about going, well, I want to do this, and can I speak to that, and when can I meet the director, and not kind of sit back and sort of, because oftentimes the receiving institution may not have a very detailed plan for you. So having a certain wherewithal to lead on that yourself is important.
You have to make it
And I
happen.
think it's fair to say the Fulbright, the process of application as well, will help people mature what it is they want to do, and when they arrive in the States, and they will be well positioned to take advantage of what's available to them. I was going to address a question there. So Lisa was asking about in writing a broad outline, how long should it be, and who should I email it to? Well, who you should email to would be, if it's for a scholar professional program, to Sonia. If it's for a student program, send it to Paula. And how long it should be, I think really just focus on the salient facts. We're not going to be reviewing your work or your discipline or anything that you're specifically saying like that. We're really just going to be looking at maybe where you're pushing the boundaries, where the institution you think you want to go to, maybe the time period, and if you want to do something a little bit different. That's really what we would look out for. So we don't need the whole project, we just need salient facts. And the other thing I wanted to say was that please also look at the US side of the program. There are a lot of US Fulbrighters who come to by all means, reach out to them. They're part of the family, and they'd be quite interested in involving, in giving feedback and helping you along as well, because they've done it, and they're going to be welcoming of you to do that. See what they did and where they went. One of the things, there was an earlier question that was talking about, did you have to be affiliated? We would actually get quite a lot of US applicants who would be at large. So they don't have our current institution. And we would get some, across all disciplines, we would get some Irish Fulbrighters who are applicants who apply for that, who are essentially at large. So that's not something to be feared. That's something actually even to be embraced as part of your story.
I think what Tanya said is also relevant, not only within the institution, but outside the institution. If you end up in the Exploratorium and you're in California, reach out to the local Irish consulate. Fulbright is whatever you make it, as in the more you give, the more you'll get back. Reach out to many people inside and outside the institution, and just send emails, because you never know where it may take you.
Rowan, there's a last question about pairing up in doubles. Could somebody on the Fulbright team take that, please?
Anya, could you read that out, please?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I have to open it up here. It's about, can you get two partners applying together, two cultural, from Tommy Soro? Can you apply as a team of two cultural practitioners? Would this require two separate applications for the same project?
It would be two, because we're not funding the projects per se, it's the people. So yes, they're two different people applying.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I've never had, like, I understand the concept, but yeah, you'd have to apply as separate applicants.
Fulbright is about people. That's our starting point, is the people.
It's about the people. And I would say as well, to go back to what Tanya and Paula were talking about, it's that can-do attitude, and it is, if you go to Smithsonian and something, you need to be proactive. You need to start networking and getting involved with the institution, because no one's going to come and hold your hand. So that's the maturity thing. But I think if you have to think about it, and this is what, especially like the master students going to the US, you have to think about, you're getting on that plane, you're going to look for that accommodation, you're gonna, so it's such an achievement, actually. I think it's such an amazing opportunity, and it is so life-changing to get on that plane, to get the accommodation, and to get to somewhere like the Smithsonian and say, oh my God, look at all the things I can do and all the people I can meet here across all disciplines, and to embrace that. But you have to think about how you are as a person. Or are you willing to take a step out of yourself and promote yourself? It's very important. Americans are all about promoting themselves, and they're very enthusiastic about meeting people and inviting you to things, and it's you taking those opportunities, and Dara always says it, being a yes person, saying yes to everything, that you never would say yes to. We had a scholar on the call recently, and she said, I just said yes to everything. I just took the opportunity to say yes to everything and just go outside my comfort zone, and it'll stand to you for the rest of your life. I think it's an amazing
We might take the
opportunity.
last question, Sonia. There still seems to be a little bit of confusion between the professional fellowships and the scholar awards, the scholar, student, professional. So we might make that our last question.
So the Creative Ireland Professional Awards are for 7 years plus professionals, and you can apply to the All Discipline Scholar Awards in the visual performing arts, the creative area, and it's 5 year plus professional experience. So, and then the Student Awards are for students who have a degree, and then if they want to do a master's program or research as part of their PhD, or if they want to go to one of the Creative Ireland Smithsonian Exploratorium to do a piece of research within a school within those organizations. And again, that's all about reaching out to those organizations, making contact, being proactive, having a plan of what you want to do, and presenting it to the person in the institution.
That
Just
hopefully
finish
answers
up on
Gary's questions.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just going to finish up on a final point, and I think it was a very important slide that Sonia put up about the application and the process. That I say this every year now, that there are really no downsides other than your time for putting together an application, because it does really make you think. And Helen and everybody who's done this says the same thing, that it makes them think about what it is that they want to do, and where they want to go. But the other side of it is that Fulbright is very well known, particularly in the States. It's a really well known program. So just by reaching out and saying that you are thinking of applying for it, you're already pushing quite an open door. There are already a lot of engagement. And there's even a certain element of, well, you must be good if you're applying for a Fulbright. So there's a lot of positives from doing that. And like, we would often have scholars, particularly scholars coming in for interview and saying, you know what, I don't mind if I don't get this award, because it's been such a positive experience already. And sometimes they'll say, look, I've actually been over there twice already to give a lecture or to do some work with them, or we've started the work project now anyway. So it was a great opportunity for me to arrive. So I'm just coming back to the point. I say this to everybody on all of our webinars. There really are no downsides to applying other than the time you might spend, but it's time you're investing in yourself. So it's a positive thing to do. I think we should probably finish up there. If there are
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much to the Fulbright family. I can see people logging off, and they're here to help, and we look forward to receiving lots of applications. Many thanks.
Anya, thank you. Helen, thank you. Team.